So in 2018, just 6 years ago, I was in a room similar to this size, happened to be at a zoo, and I was invited to talk about elephant conservation, reproduction, and the crisis we were in for elephant populations, just 6 years ago. I had been studying elephants for 20 years prior, so I knew a few things. I did my PhD on elephants, my postdoc, I spent a lot of time in Africa. I knew a lot about elephant reproduction. So when they invited me in, it was, give the stats, tell us what's up, kind of a doom and gloom situation. After 20 years of doing this, I was sick of the doom and gloom, and I decided to change my talk without permission and give my solution to the problem. After that talk, I was all excited. I'll talk fast, so if I talk fast, you can tell me to slow down. I'm really passionate about wildlife conservation and breeding and the details of breeding, but even the simplest parts. I had my plan, I presented it, and after I was done, I actually looked at the audience. Most people were looking down, and only 2 people were totally stoked about it. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to share just a few of those slides of that presentation and why that's relevant to this group now. So it wasn't a pleasant place to be. And some of the remarks I got after that talk were, how do you think you can do that? You can't come into, you're a scientist, you're not actually in the elephant barns. This group of people have been doing this for 20 years, and you think you're going to come and change that. You shouldn't say those things, that wasn't appropriate. I kind of did a fuck you. Can I say that? Sorry. But I'm going to give you a bit of that presentation. So I started with this. There's this many elephants in zoos. There's African, there's Asian, this many males, this many females. I've given this talk many times. I showed the doom and gloom about elephants are going to be extinct in zoos within 50 years if we don't change this negative growth rate. I've been studying reproduction. Most of our elephants were now not even possible of conceiving. So this is I've been doing this for 20 years. I gave the same talk 20 years, and I was sick of it. Okay, so I give this presentation that there's only about 3 births per year during the last 18 years. However, there was 4.5 to 5 deaths. Most of those have to be euthanized because of joint issues, elephants that didn't do well in captivity. So we're on this negative growth rate, right? And I was just supposed to be okay with it, show the stats, and go sit down. So within the AZA, with the zoo elephant population, they had this target goal to be sustainable of 225 elephants. Now, as I'm talking about this, I want you to think how, I know as I'm talking about elephants, I'm going to get to bongo and kudu and everything that, unless anybody has elephants in here, I'd really like to talk to you. But keep this in mind. So what I did, this is the part I wasn't supposed to present, I was like, well, I'm going to assess every single elephant, because there's only 123 females. That's not that big of a deal. So yes, I cut and pasted each one of those elephants for a point. Put 123 up there. Okay? And so the AZA had these guidelines of, okay, they're 123, but a lot of them are excluded because an elephant over 40 can't reproduce. Number one, that's false. I spent a lot of time in Africa, and they actually don't go through a menopause, and they can have calves to their 50s and 60s. But guidelines said, eliminate those 40. And then also, if an elephant's 24 and never had a calf, eliminate those as well. And that's prime reproductive age. Now, I'm saying this because there wasn't science behind it, right? This is based on experience and what they knew, and it became the industry gold standard. And I was not okay with that. Standards have to change as we learn and share more. So then I presented this, okay, actually we don't have 123 elephants because you excluded half of them. We've now excluded 62. We're down to 61 elephants. And what's the plan with these 61 elephants? Well, we need 225. And so we did these stats of, obviously that's not sustainable. What happened if we increased it, 4 to 5 births? Well, that's still not going to be sustainable. What if we had 6 to 7 births? Still not sustainable. It's going to take about 50 years to get to that population. The most optimistic reproductive scenario was 8 births per year. Okay? So the conclusion of this group of population biologists and elephant experts was, let's go for 4. That seems wise. Let's just do what we've always done. Let's do that. And so I said, no, we go for 10. So how do we go for 10? We bring back some of these elephants that were excluded, right? Let's make a plan. I'm not just saying let's like throw magic into the air. Let's have a plan and work this out. So I studied this, and there's laws, and not laws, there's guidelines that say elephants shouldn't breed over 24, everything should be taken into consideration. So I took this to heart. All factors should be taken into account. So to me that means social and health, and not just age alone. So I really worked to get this submitted through all zoos so that I could go in and assess every elephant for these different things regardless of age. That's such bullshit. So this is what I did. I spent a lot of time, well, that was only 6 years ago. So I deep dove into this, looked at all these different things, social, climate, all these things that affected reproduction. I spent a lot of time in obesity and body condition. Some of the things are very sciencey. Some of them really took me making a checklist and going into zoos. Obviously, I had to build trust, so I scooped a lot of elephant shit, build trust within the barn. And instead of like going crazy and right to AI and all that, sometimes let's just do some basic stuff, like train your elephants to do this first. Let's break it down. Sometimes it's just as simple as, are your male and bull and cow elephants together 24/7? Because standard management was separate out the bull except for breeding. That doesn't work. So I'm saying this because sometimes we like to go really far sciencey, which I'll get to because I know Brian likes that stuff. But sometimes it's really simple, and sometimes that can make all the difference. Same thing for the males. Here we have 39 males. There's some exclusions. The guidelines say collect semen after age of 8, right? Every zoo knew this. But when I did the survey, only 2 to 3 were actually collecting semen, right? So how are you implementing AI if you don't have semen? All of these things. So I spent time with the groups of people, and it came to be like, nobody knew how, right? And everybody felt scared to admit that. Nobody wanted to admit that in a room. So from this presentation, I stood up and said, I have a plan. I'm gonna go into every zoo, work with teams, perfect semen collection. I'm gonna raise all the money to do this, and I did. So it's all a nonprofit, which is not a sustainable method. I do not recommend it, and I'll talk about that in a bit. I don't have the bandwidth to do that again, but we did that. After this talk, so I said, we're gonna do this. We're gonna assess every female, and I'm willing to do this all. And when I got those reactions of only 2 people in the audience really understanding and being on board, that's all I needed. You only need a couple people to get it. And I just flew with that. So what I did was this, right? I went to a lot of places. I did a lot of elephant semen collections. Not just did them, I taught teams how to do them. Because that does no good if I'm the only one in the room that can do this stuff, right? So you teach. You teach teams how to do it. I teach them ultrasound, all the things. Went around to all the zoos, spent a lot of time in Africa looking at what's normal, bringing elephant keepers to Africa to see what an actual elephant breeding and socially looks like in the wild. Developed some metrics based on science of how, one of the biggest things I found that elephants in zoos are primarily obese, which was related them to not even having a reproductive cycle. So an elephant that had a body condition score of 5, which is the highest, was actually 3 times more likely not even to have a cycle. So when we're talking about our animals and our care, this is a big issue or something to consider. I see this often when I go do reproductive procedures, especially if it's laparoscopically. If there's a lot of fat, it's really hard to do. But sometimes we don't know what that is. So you have to be humble enough to say, I don't know, what can I do? And that's what we did in elephants. Again, spend a lot of time in Africa studying elephants. Have a whole program there now to continue learning that. So this is the fun part. It doesn't always work this way, but it will if you're persistent. So just this last year, through all of that, in just 6 years, we now had 12 confirmed pregnancies, which is pretty phenomenal. It's the first time we've had a positive growth rate in 20-something years. And all it takes was some courage and a few people in the room saying, sign me up, right? Now, did I make a ton of mistakes? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. But you have to be okay. You have to fail forward, and that's what we did. And so I'm super proud of that, and I'm super thankful for the 2 places in that room that said, let's get this started. And then it just continued. Once one person gets on and sees and hears, then the next person. So the cool thing about this, the 2 zoos that got on board right away, and then there were 5 eventually that kind of ran it, all those pregnancies are at those 5 facilities. So it just tells you, like, proximity means something. Being in the room means something. And I still have great relationships with all of them. But anyway, that's my quick elephant story. And how does this relate to what we're doing now? Those were my kids. That's my why. So that's Scarlett and Gianna. So that was, would have been like 8 years ago. I like to time how long I've been doing elephant stuff based on my kids' birth. So Scarlett up there in the top right corner there, that's when she was a baby. That's me doing my PhD, and when people said this is ridiculous, I took her with me. I didn't ask for permission. She just kind of showed up at zoos with me, and I put her in a stroller in the corner and did my work. But it took, and of course I had zero money, got all my own funding, but it just takes like consistent, persistent courage, a lot of passion, even when people don't think that's cool, right? So 95% of people in that room told me straight up I was too much, told me it was never gonna happen, right? But this is what I learned through that, and now doing different species, this is the themes I see. And so this is what I'm gonna share with you today, are really like 7 steps. I was really struggling with a title. Sorry, Katie, I didn't give you a title. Because this time I struggled with really what I wanted to share, what was relevant. I love the science, but I love the practical. So I wanna share, if I would start a program from scratch, what are the 7 steps that I would do? Now, this doesn't matter how sciencey or how basic you wanna go, the steps are relatively the same. But these are the themes I constantly see in things that work, right? Have an insane amount of courage, even when 95% of the room thinks you're crazy and doesn't get it. You just have to keep going. Persistence and pivot, and then more persistence again. When people say, well, we don't know, we can't do this anymore. You've been to this zoo for 2 years straight every 3 months to do the AI and it hasn't worked, but then it works on the next one, right? You can't give up on it. This isn't like textbook yet. What we're doing in the wildlife industry, we are just starting. So you have to give it some patience, but aggressively, right? We can't just wait for other people to do it. We are the ones to do it, and it's really an opportunity. And then more persistence, if I haven't made that clear. It really just takes starting where you are. If you think, well, I don't have the lab, I don't have this, you don't need that. Just start exactly where you are. So think about that now. Like, you probably have an animal or species that you are really fond of that you would like to see reproduction improve, right? Ryan talked about how important that is. We can even optimize that more. So as I'm talking about this, think of like that one species or 2 or 3 that you're like, this is the one I'm passionate about, and I'll help you get there. And then, again, it only takes a few people to make industry-wide changes, right? So that group of, now the elephant industry, now I'm welcome at the table, right? And that's okay, I get it. Some people need proof, and that's okay. And I'm there now to support every elephant program there is. I now work with 32 zoos specifically for elephants because, part of me was like, well, you didn't want to play before, I don't want to play now, right? But that's not what this is about. It's not about me, it's about sharing this, so I'm doing that now. But I have a vision of doing that with more and more and more ranches and private facilities. So as I said, doing this as a nonprofit, and me personally going raising all the funds, and very few zoos, maybe if any, I would say maybe 5% of the cost of this, that's not a sustainable approach, to just be totally honest. Like, it worked, that's not sustainable. And I'm not sure how many people as crazy I will follow for every species, right? So yeah, there is an investment in this, but you also get quicker results, and we work as a community. So I can talk about that another time. I also want to point out my kids on the bottom. So things haven't changed. We just got back from Africa 3 days ago. So that's us there. And they're older, and now they can help and work, which is awesome. So Scarlett's helping me with a giraffe ultrasound over there. But it's important for me and to have the message of take others with you. Whether your family, your colleagues, the community, it doesn't mean a lot if you don't take others with you. So I just encourage you to do that, even if you don't like them. So now this is a bit of me. I just kind of jumped into a story and a bit of my background. I'm not going to go on to all this. I'm from Nebraska, so yes, I studied a lot of cattle and pigs, did my master's on pigs. After doing that, I managed a reproductive program at Omaha Zoo for several years while doing my master's. I knew I wanted to do my PhD, but I was from Nebraska, a small little town of 200 people. My parents were my teachers. The program I heard to do this with the Smithsonian in DC, that's really far. So I worked in animal biotech and vaccine development for a while. Applied to medical school, got in, turned it down. You know when you know. And so that's when I decided to sell everything, go on a leap of faith, and volunteer at the Smithsonian for 3 years before I got into that program. And that's when I really started to see what reproductive physiology and breeding can do, right? I kind of knew it, but then I saw it. And I knew I needed that to really be an influence and help others succeed and bring others with me. So I spent a lot of time at Smithsonian. Since then, I run programs in Africa. And then in 2019, so after that elephant conference where, didn't go great, I started my company. So I was working with zoos and fundraising, and I was like, it's too slow. There's too much red tape. I'm never gonna get what we need to get done for wildlife if I'm, writing a grant and waiting 2 years and have to stick to that exactly, and you can't pivot, right? Like, you have to do something and pivot the next day. Grants don't let you do that. And so that's when I jumped on a limb and I started this company. So Katie made this beautiful logo for me. My mom was like, there's a sperm in the logo. I'm like, it's a snake, it's fine. Yeah. But Katie even said, she's like, I think that was the first request ever I got for a sperm in a logo, but yeah. And the last. So my company now, so we do everything, reproductive consulting, whether it's just the consulting or more now, it's actually full program. Ranches, private facilities hire me as a reproductive physiologist. So everything from basics of, is your animal pregnant by ultrasound? Come in and tell me why my animals aren't reproducing. Diet, nutrition. I spend a lot of time now developing IVF in our exotics and embryo transfer, which I'm really excited about. And then I have a full semen bank and biobank center as well. So for example, if I come to your ranches to collect semen on a bongo or a kudu, you own that semen. But now we have a place without a lot of red tape that you can store it safely, and when you want to use it or you want me to come AI your animals, you have it. So I just wanted a really slick, easy to get a hold of, not a lot of red tape. We do what we need to get done, and we do it quickly. So now I have a team of 15 full-time people. So we serve mini zoos and ranches. Katie in the middle there is one of my PhD students. I have PhD and master's students, so she runs the endocrinology part of what I do. So it's kind of a full-service shop. That's me carrying semen of some sort for an AI. But yeah, so this is relatively new, and I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to serve and share that. Just as an opportunity, just because it just needs to be done. A little bit now, besides my companies, this is a big part of who I am as my kids. You've seen them already. Taking them with me to learn to be a part of this is really important. Now, if they're smart, they'll want to do this and take over the company. But insofar they do, you kind of have that secret, like, I hope you love it, but I'm not going to force it on you. Luckily, they love it. A big part is taking groups. I still take groups to Africa. So that's my daughter, bored because she's seen too many elephants. And I'm like, look at this. Do you know how amazing this is? But that elephant is just wild, right? So I've studied elephants a lot to know behavior. I knew she wasn't going to get hurt. But I want to invite you and take others with me and with you on experience like this because it changes you. It really does. All right. So now, how you start your breeding program. Now you'll probably think, well, we already have breeding. I want you to think about it a little bit differently. So I just talked very briefly about AI and embryo transfer. I won't get into all the details of that, but I want you to think about, take an example of what do you want for your facility? Maybe you want to optimize reproduction in every single species, or maybe you just really want to focus in on one, right? And sometimes you're like, how do I define my vision if I don't know what there is? So I'll give you an example. If I talk too fast, slow me down. All right. These are giraffes. Thank you, Brian Gilroy. We actually purchased many of our giraffes. This is a ranch that I actually manage in Brenham, Texas. As a result, actually, of the last education presentation I gave. There was that 1% also in the audience that day that approached me right after and said, I want to do all of this. You know, I'm like, yes, you should. So he showed me a property, not an animal person, and said, you know, I want to do right by, you talked about giraffes a lot, and what you did in elephants, I want to do that in giraffes. So luckily, I called Brian and John and Tad, and they were able to get us some really nice giraffes to start this program. But to me, so this was his vision. Let's not just have giraffes. Let's also, like reproductive technology in giraffe is like very minimal. There has been one or two successful AIs previously, but nothing consistent, right? We know very little about their cycles and social needs. Like, I was using elephant as a model because I knew elephants so well. She's like, I want to crack the code on science of giraffes and be a giraffe place and know if they're pregnant and when they're due and genetics, and you know, that's a lot to start from scratch. So I said, okay. So this is where we are just now as an example. So we have, at this facility, there's 12 giraffes. We can do this at any facility. Now, I know not all facilities, the giraffes are housed in a way that you can collect fecal samples. I'll get to that. But you can still learn, you can still do things for giraffes, even if you can't go out and collect fecal samples. So this is just showing you for this specific giraffe. So I monitor her reproductive cycles through fecals. Now, most people probably think a giraffe starts to be reproductively mature, capable of pregnancy at age like 4 or 5. Actually, that's not true. I've had giraffe pregnant at age 1.5. So I say start monitoring early, especially if they're fed well, have good nutrition, they will cycle early, just like humans and cattle. So now this is just an example. You know, I have 12 profiles. So I show when she's not reproductively mature. I'm afraid to use a pointer because I might mess it up, but I'll try. Okay, yeah. And then here, she starts cycling, right? 4 to 5 perfect, beautiful cycles. I then said, hey, let's put her with the bull. I'm also doing this so I can time for AI, but this is her first. She's young, so I wanted her to have a normal breeding in calf first, and then I'll use her for AI next. And so sure enough, I knew exactly the day she was going to come into estrus. So 2 days prior, I put her with the bull, right? So it's not just like, whoa, you're in estrus, that's a lot. So I give them time to get together, bred, and now I follow her pregnancy. Now, because I know her exact estrus, I can tell you, which is really nice, if anybody has experience with giraffes, it's really tricky, number one, to know if they're pregnant visually, and number two, to predict how far along. And I'm a reproductive physiologist, and sometimes I'm off by 3 months visually. But with poop, I'm not off. This is awesome. So I can tell you, she's going to have a baby middle of May. And it's spot on. And that has been a game changer. It helps you determine, you know, if you're looking to sell your giraffes, like what's a safe time, like how far in gestation is safe to transport them, all the different variables. Your team can be ready and prepared to prepare for that calf. It's just a game changer that you know what's going on with your animals. I'm not going to get into all of this, but as an example, I want you to be thinking about, I plan on doing this for kudu, for bongos. I just want you to think about that and how you might be involved with that. So I also wanted, within giraffe, there's a lot of species, subspecies information. I wanted to see what the heck we had. So I took on this project of getting fingerprints, hoof prints of giraffes, both in zoos and the private sector. Because I really want to start promoting, you know, within zoos, those are mostly just breeding with zoo giraffe, and there's a lot of inbreeding. You know where there's a lot of giraffe? In Texas. So it makes a lot of sense to cross those genetics, right? And if I can show genetic matches, it makes more sense to give precedent for zoos to do that. This is just me figuring out that I can actually get the whole genome of your giraffe from a single hair. So I partnered with the University of Illinois, some brilliant geneticists. That's not me. I just kind of know what I want to get done, and then I find the right people to do it. We can figure out exactly your species, subspecies of a giraffe, which is just pretty cool. We're not there yet to absolutely need that. Right now, a giraffe is kind of a giraffe. You want a giraffe, you can get a giraffe. But I'd like to get to the point, especially as we partner with zoos, potentially bring in semen from Africa, it makes sense to get to this species level, and it's a hair. Now, some of the people that their giraffes weren't in like an enclosure where you can just go grab a hair, they got super creative. Maybe there's some people in this room. Hid behind trees, a giraffe would go by, grab a hair. There are some stories, but people did it, which was just fantastic. I'll share these results at another time, but now we have fingerprints on a large population of our giraffe. And it just, to me, it was just the science and to get it easy. I don't want to do things that nobody can use, right? It's not helpful. So how do we take these complicated things and make it simple that we can use? So within the private sector, I will tell you the private sector are the ones who funded that, right? So if the private sector and people in this room produce these things, that's just a huge advancement to what we can do. And that took not that long, not even a year. Just showing you, like, compared to 20 years, whatever it was for elephants, right? Another part of the vision, this is an example of this vision, was also, besides for this facility, knowing, good healthy giraffes, reproductive performance, genetics, I also wanted to know these giraffes felt comfortable, right? A comfortable giraffe typically lays down, and this was really awesome to see. Now, keep in mind that these giraffes didn't come from the same place, right? So you provide good quality browse, feed, work on social stuff at the right time, this can happen, and very quick, which is pretty dang amazing. So also at this facility, I designed that barn. Also at the facility, the vision was reproductive technologies. Let's get to AI-ing giraffe, just like we do in other species. It would be a lot simpler to just collect semen rather than moving bulls, right? That's pretty common. So can we do this? So yeah, so that's me AIing giraffe. We have had a success, which is exciting. Now my time-wise, now they have all the hormones. All my giraffe are pregnant. The places that I manage giraffes are all pregnant, right? Which is a great thing. But at the same time, I'm like, hurry up and calf so I can now. I needed them to first prove that they'd have a healthy calf normally before I'd feel comfortable for them to be AI'd. So anyway, we're doing that. So that's your vision. That's a lot. Your vision does not have to be that big. It can be, help me, Kari, decide, these are my species, what can we do? Are they reproducing normally, etc.? So what's your vision? Number 2, what is normal? So a lot of times your vision will change because then I'll say, hey, we need to do some basic reproductive information on this species before you go all in, right? A lot of times we don't know. For example, this is a repro talk after all. So this is a giraffe penis. And on the end of that giraffe penis, there is this protrusion, like this piece of skin. Do you see that hanging there, right? If you haven't, I'm educating. This is an education event. I can't tell you how many pictures I get from people that send me a picture of like, something's wrong with my giraffe penis. And I'm like, no, that's absolutely normal. So now you know. But this goes to the basic reproductive anatomy physiology. And the more you know, the more you share. So anatomy, that goes with the females too. Some, like, you can't just do AI like that because their cervix is like this, so I have to do laparoscopically, which is 2 surgical small incisions. There's a lot of things, but these are the things. You tell me your species, and I'll sit down with you and tell you reproductive anatomy, physiology, and what kind of plan could make sense. What kind of season are they? This is a quick example of a facility 4 or 5 years before I really dove into the giraffe stuff, said, hey, is my giraffe pregnant? And I'm like, just send me a handful of samples. And they sent me this. This is before I had a database. And I'm like, yeah, it looks pregnant because the levels are really high. This is sometimes how God works in your favor. They're like, when is she due? And now keep in mind, this was 4 samples, and I had never seen this giraffe. And I was like, I studied this long and hard. They sent me pictures, they tried to give me history, and I said, can't remember exactly the date, but I was 3 days off. That's never happened again. Because now I get to cheat. Now I know their cycles, right? But it was just kind of funny, and I was like, this is really cool. So from that, though, sent a whole precedent of now really defining, knowing a lot about giraffe reproduction. So sometimes, again, you just have to start. Okay, step 3. Whatever your vision is, the species or species you're looking at, you have to know where you are, right? A lot of times you just assume they're reproductively mature. You assume that bull has reproductively viable semen, right? So it makes sense to take some time to figure out where the heck you are. Now, because it's education, I have to nerd out just a little bit, but I won't get too sciencey here. I don't know if any of your facilities have ever submitted samples for hormone testing, right? It's like a profile progesterone, and I'm just gonna just show you what the heck that is, because one day when you send samples to me, you'll be like, that's what she's testing for. And it's good to just know basics. Okay, so that's an ovary, right? So this is the egg, mature, okay? It's going through this process of developing and maturing, and that's when it ovulates, right? So this is the ovary, that's that egg. So that's the egg that's going to be fertilized, we hope, to make the embryo. After that egg is ovulated by that spot on the ovary, it then forms a corpus luteum. That's like scar tissue post-ovulation. That corpus luteum is what secretes progesterone. And progesterone, say this egg got fertilized, right? Progesterone is a hormone that maintains pregnancy and gives nourishment to that embryo. This provides that progesterone for the embryo to develop until the placenta takes over, which is pretty cool, right? So then we figured out, wow, I should test progesterone because that tells me when she's gonna cycle. So again, progesterone secreted from there. And so from that, so now you can kind of visualize what's happening in that ovary. Every time an egg is being released, you're getting this increase in progesterone, right? So this happens in a giraffe about every 15 days, right? So you have this nice cycling pattern. If you see this, that means that that egg's not ovulating, right? And then you don't have, it's called flatline, right? And this is what you want to see, nice cycling patterns. This goes for all your species, right? So now I'm doing this for bongo and kudu and all the things, but just giving you a nice clear example because we still need more data on a lot of these animals. Okay, so going back to that giraffe who, initially gave me 4 samples. Now I monitor their whole facility. I have their cycles down pat. We actually use their cycles now to prevent pregnancy. Seems ironic and backwards. But because, she is just fertile. She'll have a calf and then the next cycle get pregnant, and we just needed her to rest because she also had babies. Her first pregnancy was at age 1.5. So we're like, so instead of just isolating that bull completely, because that's not great for any animal, he could be with the group except for those 3 days, and I knew those 3 days every time, which is pretty cool. It's just useful to manage. It is better for it socially, all the things. And then the minute we said, okay, we wanted to time the babies to be born in spring, so I said, all right, we're ready, put her with him, and like that bred. So just another way to use hormones to manage. So again, this wasn't that long ago, just a couple years actually, and now we have beautiful profiles of this is what a giraffe cycle looks like. I want to get there for everything. That's why I need you. I don't have these animals, but you do, but I have the science, so we can figure this out together. Same thing with males. It's really great to grab a fecal sample, and I can tell you testosterone level. It just gives me some indication on that animal's capacity for sperm production, if you don't want to do a full semen collection. So a quick shout out to the High Point Haven team. They're in Pilot Point, Texas. That's Dan, the owner, on the far right. They've been phenomenal on 1% in the room getting it. So I said, let's crack the code on this draft stuff. So a huge thank you to them. Also as an example, so sometimes if your animals, you feel like they're not breeding or not interested, he's not mature, he's not interested in this female, something's not working, I hate to say it, there is preference. Sometimes they don't like each other, and that sucks. But you can change things around. So this giraffe here, this was his testosterone low before he brought a new girl into town. The new girl arrived, and his testosterone skyrocketed. And then he has these nice fluctuations in testosterone. It also helped him be interested in the females he wasn't interested in before. So just showing, it doesn't take necessarily doing crazy, IVF and embryo transfer. Sometimes it's some basic concepts that I like to try first, rather than, knocking down your animals. Sometimes it's a simple social change. Okay, quickly, how are we on time? Good? Okay. Just quickly, hormones can tell us a lot, right? One of the things I just want to harp on, because stress gets a bad, yes?
How are you testing for testosterone?
Fecal. Yeah, I'll get to that here in a second, but you can do blood too, but that's fecal. Stress gets a bad rep. Stress is actually important and healthy for an animal, and actually you need stress for ovulation. So a lot of times we are like, oh, let's make sure animals aren't stressed at all, that's better for them, right? So distress is bad, right? Running fences a lot, obviously that's bad, and that can be detrimental to reproduction. Also, being too calm is also detrimental to reproduction. So many times I go into facilities, especially zoos with elephants, and they're like, he's not interested. I'm like, he's bored as heck. Scare the guy, do something. Like, you just need to, so it's funny, they're keepers then, and luckily I've grown close to them. They would actually physically send me videos of them hiding and jumping out. I'm like, well, maybe not that kind of stress, but it's a good try. But just changing up social arrangements, right? So some stress is good. So when you send me fecals and they're completely low, that's not good. Too much is not good. There's a medium level. And it's more of how you respond to stressful situations. I just want to point that out because soon I'll be writing a paper about the benefits of stress because it gets such a bad rep. You need stress. I need stress to do this in a way because it makes me excited to talk about this, right? How do we test hormones? To answer Brian's questions, so you can do blood, you can do urine, you can do fecals. That's really easy. Everything shits. It's great. You put it in a bag, you send it to me. So this is a super simple protocol, and whoever's interested, I have my contact at the end. You just send me a quick text, and I will send you a styrofoam bag, Sharpies, fecal bags, gloves, so there's no excuses. It's super easy, right? You collect the poop, you put it in a freezer, and then you send it to me, and then I process it from there. A lot of places that want to know more long-term what's happening with animals, I'll make a quick sheet for them so that then your team can record when the poop sample's collected. I know it seems so easy, but sometimes the easiest things work. You send them to me. This is back to a reminder of just start. These are my kids processing fecal samples in my basement during COVID because everything got shut down. But I was the only endocrinology lab still open in the US. So my lab was at a zoo. COVID shut it down. I said, well, my basement's not being used. I guess I'm going to renovate it into a lab. So it's phenomenal, though, because all these zoos and places would send fecal samples to my doorstep in a neighborhood. So those are my kids working. But now we have a full lab. But it's just good. Like, don't let excuses get in your way, right? You just have to keep going. And then I run through an enzyme immunoassay. I won't share about all that, but we can test for different health hormones, but testosterone, progesterone are key. I give you a fancy report, not just graphs, but tell you what the heck it means. This one, we were trying to prevent pregnancy, so I'm like, keep him away from that female in these days and you're good, right? So just taking something like from poop to go to this is pretty fantastic. Step 4, this is one thing you can do right now. Be prepared for post-mortem collections. What does this mean when your animal dies? It happens. It happens when you don't want it to. But what you can do is recover the sperm and the eggs from the ovaries within 48 hours. You send them to me. If I have the semen, I can make embryos and store them in my bank. I have draft embryos from this, just post-mortem. I have thousands of semen samples from post-mortem. People overlook this, right? And this semen then belongs to you. I just want to provide the service. So same thing. Send me a text, I'll send you the collection package and how to do this. This happened to be a giraffe, and sometimes animals are just castrated, right? Send me the testes. It's a great way. Just showing you this is a testy. That's part of the epididymis that I then dice up to get the sperm cells. That ended up in 40-something straws. It only takes 2 straws to do an AI in a giraffe. So just to give you an idea, that's a lot of giraffes sitting there from one testis. You can do this for an animal. Also, sperm collection, semen collections. It's not all postmortem. This, any opportunistic time that you're putting an animal down, I can come and collect semen, right? So this is a very, it doesn't hurt the animal. It's electroejaculation on this one. I can also train your animals. Yes?
So we've actually made multiple efforts to draw semen, not with you,
Mm-hmm.
someone else. We have a 0% success rate, and I know that's not the case with your efforts.
Mm-hmm.
In every event that we've done it, we've tried different drugs,
Mm-hmm.
but we always end up just getting urine
On all species.
on everything we've done.
Mm.
We've done Grevy, we've done Sable, we've done Kudu, we've done Bongo, I think we've done Markhor.
Oh, yeah.
So could you just
Yep.
make a comment about what separates you and your success from others that offer the process of doing
Sure.
it without the result? Because
Yeah.
it's been very frustrating to spend the time and the money and the risk of knocking an animal down
Right.
to try to do this to get a result that doesn't work.
That's right. And especially, and obviously other people, I'm sure, collected semen without urine. I'm not magic, but I do have a different method. And that's based on, I spent a lot of time studying the reproductive anatomy of each of these males. And from my experience, and early when I watched people collect, it was a bit too aggressive right away, right? So I take actually a bit of time to not overstimulate. A lot of times it's overstimulation. So I have found that taking a little bit more time for less stimulation, actually, I'll get to in a minute. I do rectal, non-sedated semen collection on elephants voluntarily. And this is all rectal palpation. And I spend time first, I know the anatomy. My little body is not gonna do a lot. But if I stimulate the tract, that its own muscles contract and get the accessory sex glands to get the seminal fluid, that's the key. So it's taking time to get that animal stimulated that its own body is doing the work.
So foreplay is the answer.
Foreplay is the answer, all day long. If you learn anything about today's education event. But you can still get urine. I'm not gonna say I'm perfect, but I'll get some without urine. I'm gonna go back to this because this is pretty fun. So I'm also using what I learned from elephants. I'm also training giraffe for non-sedated voluntary semen collection. Giraffes like to jump forward when they breed and ejaculate, hence that mattress pad in there, and so that he doesn't hurt himself. So, learning, trying things. I go to Walmart and see what can I find. Camping mattresses work great. And so this is a semen tank just showing you this is what it looks like. That doer can go with me, transports. I'm gonna send this to you all, or at the end, just grab my contact. This is what you need to do if you have an animal pass, male or female, to send me testes or ovaries, okay? And I can send you a kit with the stuff. It's a huge opportunity if those animals pass that you can just do this super easy. If you do nothing else, do this. All right, a couple more steps and then, okay. This seems obvious, but it cannot be underlooked. Optimizing body condition is so critical. It is proven over and over again in cattle and goats and these other species I have way more experience with. Obesity and excessive body fat will definitely hamper both natural and assisted reproduction. Now, when I say this, it's also important to fluctuate body condition with season. There are sometimes they should be heavier. The key is fluctuations and seasonal variation. I'll show you why without totally nerding out, but just slightly. This is why it's important, because in your brain, this tiny gland here that controls reproduction, that's also the pathway of communication of all of your metabolic and body fat and eating hormones. So it makes sense that this tiny pea-sized gland, where both reproduction and metabolism are controlled, of course they're coordinated and correlated, right? And they directly affect your stress levels, a direct effect on your ovaries, the testes. I won't go into all of this, but I have done enough research now in showing direct correlations with season and why seasonal feeding and seasonal changes in body fat are actually really important for reproductive health. A lot of people just like to feed the same. Fat animal is a healthy animal? No. They should go through periods of of not as much food because it keeps that communication active, right? So once that communication gets too stable, homeostasis means death. 0 is death. You don't want it like that. You need fluctuation, so it has to keep talking. So anyway, I've spent way too many years studying fat elephants, but this is just an example, too, of why I promote seasonal feeding in giraffe. I won't go through all of this, but I think that is why now all of our reproductive efforts for giraffes at the places I consult at is spot on, and because of the variations. You all know that's not real, that's good. Yeah. So I did this in elephants, now I'm doing this in giraffe, is developing validated visual ways to assess body condition, right? So that's just really useful. It's changed how we manage elephants. I want to get there for giraffes too. I'm finding now the way you assess body condition in giraffe is mostly in the neck and then on the tail head, but that'll be another whole talk. To match with that, what I mean by validated, that the outside score has some physiological meaning, not just Kari says it looks fat. So these are all the things I test that have to do with fat and fat content. Did this in elephants, again. So how I collect those samples, so for insulin, it's from saliva, so that is just saliva. Y'all, this is repo talk, but that's saliva. So this is me collecting saliva from a giraffe, which actually works out great. Typically, this giraffe, Forrest, who you know, Amber, he was actually trained to be on a bottle by biting on my hair at first when he was young, and so he continues to have that habit, but it works great for saliva collection. Now, why that's important is because insulin, if there's one hormone that is so critical to reproduction, it's insulin and glucose. And so anyway, I'm studying some metrics for giraffe and other species. And elephants, I can tell you based on a level if that elephant is healthy or not, just based on insulin. Anyway, last step, carefully plan your facility and barn design. Now, if you're thinking, oh, I don't need a barn for this species, also carefully plan your pastures, your areas, that you can access these animals, whatever reproductive thing you're thinking. You don't need the fancy stuff I'm going to show you. I do many of these things just in a field setting, but you have to be considerate. If you are starting from scratch and you really want to be a breeding facility for something, you can contact me and we can look at it, but being mindful of this. It's a huge, huge deal. This is me at a conference. This is what I quickly sketched a barn for somebody because they're like, we're getting giraffes, but it's going to be cold soon. We have nothing. So this is what I mean about high complexity planning. This is me on a scratch pad, right? But you just have to put thought to it somewhere, right? Then it became more complicated. But again, I am not an architect, but this works. Do something. Get started, right? And then you can tweak. From that became this. This was my idea of a big barn. I wanted a big, huge birthing stall. I wanted a chute. I wanted, having done enough giraffe stuff, entrances, exits on both sides, because if I'm in there, I also want an escape route, all the things, right? But I'm happy to do this with you all, and I'm happy to share this as well. And then this was the more formal, again, this is a Word document, right? Again, I'm not an architect. But it works. It works. At the end, this is what this barn looks like. That is a chute I designed specifically for giraffe reproduction. Again, there's no guidebook for that, but start, right? I say, hey, I need to do this. I need to be safely behind that giraffe. And then work with people, find welders, and build it. I'm happy to show people these plans too if it's of interest. So then you have the chute, and then you gotta figure out how the heck to use it. Because we've all heard of nightmare stories of the animals won't go in chutes. What I found, so I like my chutes outside. I like space alleyways to the chute, so the animal's not just going from barn to chute, because that can be scary. And then I don't force them to go a certain direction from day one. I let it. I put their favorite food, their favorite browse, and they just get to explore it, right? So these giraffes, again, none of them had been chute trained, came from a variety of places. Every single one of these giraffes will go through and stand in that chute. It just takes a little time and patience to do that. But I let them do that. Hang out, check it out. And then, again, non-sedated, no drugs. I mean, this is a 8-year-old female is able to we spent a lot of time. We spent a time putting that animal in there, pressure, right? Hand on its side, spending time there. So it takes some time. I can't just show up and say, let me AI your giraffe in a chute. But I'll tell you for your team, and it's actually quite fun for your teams to get involved in this stuff. I'll say, hey, start doing this. And then, yeah, we can do that. 2 sevens, 8 steps. This is keep records, right? Even if you're starting from like basic, start somewhere, keep records, analyze, pivot, 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 repeat. Now, I'm not going to give you a fancy database to do that. The best thing is to contact me, and either I can consult with you to set up something simple, I can keep your records for you, whatever it might look like. I don't know if that QR code will work from here, but if it does, all that does is take you directly, it adds my contact information to your phone. So if you want to try it, somebody can try it and let me know if it works. I'm here to help you, whatever your breeding goals might be, even just to have a discussion and say, you know, what are my options here? Happy to help. Did it work? Yeah? Sweet. Okay. I should have probably tried that before I got up here, but I'm glad it worked. All right. So back to that room just 6 years ago. And I'm really happy that I didn't let that discourage me. And instead it fueled me, which is why I'm here today. And I can see this path. We've changed the fate of the elephants in zoos. Now it's too many babies. I'm like, oh, what a problem, right? That's the problem we want. Like, it's all doable. They said it wasn't doable. 6 years isn't actually that long, right? But I want to go faster. That takes, and we can go faster because I'm not finding, doing the fundraising and getting buy-in. I just need a handful of people that want to do this, are willing to be persistent, make mistakes, fail forward, have me here again and again to figure out what the heck it is you want to do, and we will get there. So my question now, 6 years from now, I hope I get to be back, Brian, in 6 years. I'm really, really excited. I'll come back to this and post this to see where we are in 6 years. And I can tell you it's going to be phenomenal. I mean, I'm not going to give up. I know people like Brian are not going to give up on any of this. And it's fun. It really is fun. Like, we all love wildlife so much. Like, there's a reason we're in this room. But if we can, have fun doing this and figure shit out, that's, half the beautiful part of the journey is actually as exciting about the 12 elephant births, right? That part's fun, too. But it's fun to work towards something and then it work. So my invitation to you is, of course, to be one of the few that will be part of that story 6 years from now. And last, a sincere thank you to Brian Gilroy. He's had a vision for a long time, and he has stuck to it, has been persistent. Even when I'm not the best at answering phone calls and communicating, we still are working together, and I'm excited. I'm actually moving to Texas here in a few months. He is doing phenomenal things, and the things that we're going to be working on together is just outstanding. So use him as a resource. He's been a great supporter of my work, and I appreciate that very much. So thank you. And that's it.
Thank you, Kari.